Hi, and welcome to our, monthly or regular podcast. Even though we're in the studio today, WCAT's podcast studio was recently flooded. Another reason why we need a new school building. So I'm sure they're very excited. But before we do get start on our official, what we're looking forward to, what's happened, we do want to talk about a really, really, really tragic and sad moment. I know our prayers are with the family. There was, if you haven't heard, there was a significant car accident. A pedestrian was hit by a car while he was cycling. And I know, everybody's worst fears, right? Or one of their worst fears. And I know, Doug, we wanted to start by talking about that. So why don't we just get that out of the way before we get to some lighter stuff?
Sure. So the car accident took place on the corner of Farm and Hemlock, and so a car was coming down Farm, and then took a left onto Hemlock, and there was a cyclist that was coming up on the inside, and the person didn't see them, or the cyclist didn't see the directional, maybe both. We don't know, right? But the cyclist that hit the car. And so it was a pretty serious event. And so, police were on scene immediately. And so it didn't involve any students or any members of the Wakefield community. Not that that makes it any better, right? But just to let people know. Again, no students and no one from the Wakefield community. So a gentleman took a left onto Hemlock, and when they did, they caught the cyclist. The cyclist was really coming down the street very quickly. It resulted in multiple fractures for the cyclist was a 62-year-old male, and they had to be med flighted from here to Boston. So a helicopter came, landed here, and brought them to Boston. It's my understanding. I've heard via email. I haven't heard directly from the family, but I've heard via email. The person is recovering slowly, but that's the good news. And so, but it had nothing to do with the construction or the building that's happening or the new school that's happening or being built behind the current Wakefield Memorial High School. It also was separate from anything that was going on at the vocational school as well. And so, we wish that person well. And again, we wish them a speedy recovery. So that's kind of where we're at. Again, police were here immediately. We really appreciate how quickly everyone pivoted to make that all work. We also had teachers that could not have been more helpful and flexible. So because the accident happened where it was, and teachers were coming in to start the school day at the time, Amy McLeod, Principal McLeod, who's here with us, high school principal, spoke with Matt Carter, the Woodville principal, and essentially the teachers switched lots. So the high school teachers parked in the Woodville lot, and the Woodville teachers ended up parking in the high school lot because by the time elementary starts a little bit later, they were able to just be diverted and to come in and do that. But a lot of moving parts, a lot of people working on it. Great response from police, fire, and EMS. But again, very tricky. And one of the things that it highlighted for us is just, without the construction, that intersection out there is pretty treacherous, right? We actually, just as a follow-up, we had a meeting this morning with representation from the traffic committee, from the Wakefield Police, town manager Steve Mayo, members of the construction team. We had Tim O'Brien there, just kind of brainstorming about, what can we do just to be, what added measures might we be able to add just to kind of help and just to, again, help people move a little bit slower because people move down Farm Street coming from
very
Saugus
fast.
very, very fast. And that's one of our problems is just the rate of speed at which people are moving. So we're talking about a number of different things there to try to, further improve levels of safety. So there'll be more information forthcoming on that, maybe in either our July podcast or our August podcast.
No,
Likely,
it's
yeah. So
well,
yeah.
everybody looks so forward to these. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and I will say, main thing is, our thoughts and prayers are with that family, and I can't imagine. And I think your point, Doug, is right on. I think we forget sometimes, I mean, you have an elementary school,
Yep.
a high school,
Yep.
another high school. And by the way, not to say who was at fault or whatnot, but young drivers, new drivers, are notoriously known for not being good drivers. And you're putting a lot of people in a very small circle in
Yeah.
vehicles. So, you know, I always...
This was an experienced driver.
Exactly, it was.
And
So
this, under the circumstances, this was an experienced driver.
It was.
Yeah.
That's a very good correction. But the reason I bring it up is just to highlight how
Yeah.
dangerous
Yeah.
of an area it is,
Yeah.
because you have a lot going on really at the same time.
Yep.
But it's great. I think it's the one thing that you can look at as a positive. I think it's great that our town immediately reacted and tried to make it. And it's something I've always been proud of this town, at least as far as I've been involved. Wakefield's never been shy about saying if something is wrong and finds out, we got to do something quickly to try to fix it.
Yeah.
So with that said, on to, I guess, some lighter topics, but necessarily important topics. We have somebody new with us. Do you want to introduce?
Sure. You know, one of the things we've talked about in the last few podcasts is inviting other people to join us, and we thought no one better than Amy McLeod to just invite to come in and talk about her work with her administrative team and what's happening at the high school.
Well, and Principal McLeod, you should know, after the first 8 people said no, finally, no, I'm kidding.
Oh, no, I know.
I'm only teasing. Yeah, nobody wants to hang out with us. I don't get it. So, no, with that said, so the way we usually have started this thing is, what have we missed since the last one? So I know, Principal McLeod, I'll turn it to you, or Kara or Doug if you want to jump in, but really probably the biggest thing is we graduated a class. And so what have we, since I guess since the end of May, what have we missed? What's happened in the high school and the school system?
Well, I can start with the high school. A lot has gone on since the beginning or the end of May. We did have another successful senior week in graduation. We graduated a nice group of students who were going to miss a lot, but we had a wonderful senior week with them. Perfect weather for graduation, for the Grand March down at the Common. We had other events go on. The night of awards was a great success. We bring juniors there for the book awards as well. And then, of course, after prom, we have senior night, thanks to all of the sponsors and helpers in the community. Huge turnout for senior night this year. We had very, very few students not go to senior night, which was great. They had a blast partying all night at Dave & Buster's. And then graduation itself, I think, was probably the smoothest graduation we've had in my 6 years. I think finally the wheels are all moving in the right direction. It's a very student-centered, student-led event. The weather was perfect. We had lots of teachers in attendance. It was a great day.
It is, and you know, it's the culmination. You know, so people know my involvement with the Boys and Girls Clubs, and I see it a little bit, right? So, for example, we have a few now full-time staff members, but who, when I started, they were like in middle school, right? So they were like just people who came to the clubs. And in my head, they're still like 13, like they're not,
Yeah.
but no, they're adults, they're
Right,
mature,
right.
and it's so interesting to me. So I just can't imagine how the teachers and educators, how proud you must be of seeing, especially if they knew some of those kids growing up, and especially that high school period from,
Yeah.
just think, you know, from a man's perspective, like from 13 to 17, 18, I mean, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
No question.
Absolutely.
Can I ask opinion? Remember the last podcast? I think it was on the podcast, or maybe it was on the pre-show where we talked before. But we had a great conversation about. Remember, it's not called senior night. The creative thing. You know when they used to do the senior show,
Yeah.
and they haven't done the senior show. And remember, we just had a conversation about
Yeah.
what's been happening where we're seeing that. We'd love to hear your opinion. I think we kind of just thought about, you know, we're seeing less and less kids go to the arts for some reason. Or maybe less kids wanting to do the stuff that used to happen. Any ideas on why we don't see that anymore? Not that it's a big deal, but we just don't see it as much.
No, I think that what students find as fun social events has changed dramatically.
True.
And I know some assign this to COVID, and it may have partly to do with that, but I just think what students find funny, what they get a kick out of doing together has changed. So, we were finding that students in the last few years were putting on shows, and the advisors were talking to them about skits. We were all influenced by Saturday Night Live. Students don't even really know what that is anymore. They're used to sort of videos and memes and funny little one-liners that are sort of shorter. So students just didn't have an interest in putting together skits and performing skits. Some of the fundraisers that they've done or things that they're more interested in doing together involve going places, doing things. We've tried to set up some events where they're either going to the beach together or trying to get Red Sox tickets together, but less of that sense of sitting and performing for their peers. It was something that the senior class officers just couldn't get enough buy-in for the last few years, and so it could come
And kids
back.
are still creative. I mean, I gotta tell you, I think
Absolutely.
They're super creative. So,
in different ways, though.
I'm trying to remember if we actually talked about this on the podcast or if this was a conversation with like we just had and nobody knows what we're talking about.
yeah.
We did talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit about it. I think kids are still interested in the arts, but it's at their own pace.
Yeah.
So how kids participate in their own lives is changing. It's different than when we were kids, right?
Sure.
And certainly different than it was 5 years ago. We get feedback, Anthony, when parents drop their children off at college, right? Or they go visit, or they hear from their kids at college. Parents will often check in with their kids and they'll say, isn't it great being in the dorms? And the kids will say, well, what do you mean? And the parents say, like, do you meet a million people? And how great is it? And, and parents will come back and say, Doug, it's like a hotel. The doors are closed and it's completely silent. And there are kids in there, and they are. They just socialize differently.
They really do. And it's funny because you see it. I wonder how much you see it too countrywide. You're seeing the decline of like the Rotaries, and the Rotary's awesome. They're watching, but you're seeing like the decline of like those social groups, right? And they're all struggling. And I wonder if it's just a shift to how we all correspond. And the example I use is I know people criticize Facebook, but I probably have a closer relationship with my cousins in Italy than my dad did, who was actually like, who went to Italy many more times than I have.
Yeah.
Probably should be like first cousins, not second or third removed.
Yeah.
But because there was no regular interaction, whereas I see everything that happens. With all that said, should we talk about the other spectrum? What's happened in May and the whole other, or since the end of May, everywhere else? There's been kindergarten orientation.
Yeah.
Dying here.
We can go with kindergarten. Yeah, we just, our kindergarten students, our current kindergarten students end their school year a little bit earlier to make way for our incoming kindergarten students to get screened. So we've gone through the whole kindergarten screening process with you as a parent.
I did. Yeah, by the way, I didn't even know. So I figured, let's show how little I know. And you can tell he's our first, right? So my wife and I both go into the screening together. We're ready to go. They just take the kid. You don't even go in.
Yeah. Yep.
And
The first step. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wait, I wanted to go. And then I'm like, so what do I do now? Do I just? But I will say, just for review for my son on the Dole Bear. He loved it. He was very excited that his school had a dragon.
Yep.
And there was a line because it's funny. He remembers going to preschool and having it be hard when he first started. Now he doesn't mind it at all. But he goes, I'm not going to be scared of kindergarten. And I'm like sitting here almost sobbing, right? But at least my experience was incredible.
That's
And to the point of seeing people grown up, Mr. Liberti, was he a teacher of mine? He was basically, I went through and he was like, your kid's coming here. And I'm like, you're my kid's principal. Like, This is weird. We gave each other a big hug. Great guy. No idea how he is as a principal, but he was a great teacher. Great teacher.
Very good principal.
So
I'll tell you, we were there for the last day, and so there's a box of tissues on two tables, and kids were sobbing, teachers were sobbing, and it was like, and I thought to myself, I was talking for a minute to the school nurse. She too was getting a little, teary, and because the kids love being in school, right? And so as and these are the things, right? We don't want to embarrass anybody, but, about what particular kids are. And this was just many, many, many students were just broken up. that their school year was ending, right? And you think about that, right? It's not the same experience, and
So
a lot
true.
of kids don't have the same relationships with their teachers that they did a short time ago. They love their teachers. They love their teachers, and they love their school.
Oh, and
It's so strong, so significant.
and we'll get right back to it, but I want to highlight what you just said, and I know we've said this 1,000 times, but all the data shows, anybody who's even remotely involved with youth development knows that nothing makes a more significant impact than a relationship with an adult. Nothing else. And oh my God, I forget his name. There was a principal at the Woodville during Maynard Suffredini's time, and this is when we were talking about school buildings, and I remember him telling me, and it always stuck. He goes, I would take a terrible building and high quality teachers every time.
Of course.
Every time.
Of course.
So, all right. So I just cut you off and talked about my child.
No, that's important.
So what else?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's many other parents too experiencing things for the first time. So we try to put a lot of love and care into the welcoming of our new students. And we've talked also, so we have the kindergarten screening.
So let me be selfish. So what happens in a kindergarten screening? Because my son loved it. I have no idea what he did.
Yeah, so what we do in Wakefield has been teacher developed, where we've had our kindergarten teachers really play a role with our administrators in trying to make it's really useful information, but it's not so formal and intense. It's really more stations based. Just checking out overall how are the social skills, the occupational therapy skills, physical therapy skills, early readiness skills, not to be tested or anything or get a grade at the end, which you were probably looking for when your son came out.
I was like, hey, listen, his Luigi Mansion skills, if you guys get into the Nintendo Switch, he will dominate.
Absolutely.
Or he's not coming home.
But it's just really for a way to, again, just see how the students acclimate, who are the students that maybe need a little bit more support, getting in. And then, we've mentioned on other podcasts too, we've been so fortunate to do our early literacy academy this will be our 4th year. I can't believe it. Right? Am I right on the 4th year?
Yep.
So that's just been a wonderful opportunity to acclimate students even further. They get to go for a week in their home school, meet their kindergarten teacher and some other staff, and really just feel ready to go by the first day. So yeah, we're excited. We're already in the process of planning that. I met with all of the teachers who will be teaching that program yesterday for a planning session, and we'll be ready to go for August.
No, and all the teachers are so kind. And I do wonder then, we talked about the other spectrum. What about the middle? What have we done anything? I know we've done things.
Yeah.
But what do our, elementary and middle school parents have? What's happened in the past month or so?
I mean, the 4th grade at the elementary level is probably the big. I mean, there's field trips, there's field day, there's special events. Every classroom does their own spin on things. But I think the big events have been to celebrate the 4th graders who will be leaving their elementary schools and moving on to middle school. So that's been all of the elementaries. They do a really nice job making those kids feel special, and those are a lot of tissues at those events too, I'm sure.
And kids that are 4th grade going to 5th, going to the middle, they have a time when kids can come and be toured by students at the school. So middle school students tour prospective students. So they come and get a tour and hear from students, and it's really one of the very coolest things we do, because kids connect with other kids so beautifully. They just connect so beautifully, and they can ask each other the questions that are important to them. And there's usually more than one tour guide that tours a group, so that there's multiple people that can answer questions and connect while directing people around the school. So it's not only showing kids around the school, but it's actually like an opportunity to come, interact with kids, ask the things that you're most curious about. And in 5th grade, 4th grade is when when they come, they ask questions like, what are the lockers like? What is the food like? How do you get to the cafeteria? How do you wait in line? And kids answer all those questions for other kids. And for kids that, might forget or might not get an opportunity to ask their questions, they'll have other opportunities to start the school year, right? And so starting, one of the things that's changed in the last almost 10 years now is kind of the way that we start school. And that's at every level, right? Amy has changed how we start school at the high school. We've changed how we've started school at the middle school. I don't know if you want to talk about how we start at the high school, just in terms of the changes that have been made and why. I mean, it's quite good.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were talking about the data around relationships, right? I think that we try to encourage our teachers to spend the first couple of days of school really focusing on team building and getting to know your classrooms as small learning environments so that students know one another, they know names in their classes, the teachers get time to know their names, know your interests, know your likes and dislikes. Also hear more about your background with the content area. So know, if I'm an English teacher, which of my students thrive with writing, which of my students really don't like to read, those types of things, so that as I go forward and build my curriculum and want to match it to the kids who are in front of me, students have a better opportunity to have a trusted adult and to really know the adult in every room. So we've done that for the last few years.
No, it's so true. Even you know what? Like I still remember, to your point, Mr. O'Brien, who is still teaching the history now, he used to be in the English when he was an English teacher. I used to talk about making somebody feel old. When I was his student, I would always I would never pay attention to whatever he was teaching at the time, but I would grab other books that he was teaching, and he would be like, "Hey, you can borrow those," and it was so great. He would let me borrow things like it was. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. You know the famous cartoon about the Jewish family? It's Mouse.
Yep.
Night by Elie Wiesel, and there were a few other ones that he let me borrow because I was more interested in that, and he let me read it, and then he would talk to me about it, and he didn't have to do that.
Right.
But it always stuck with me, and I still talk to him, even though, so it was, but you remember those things. You remember that more than just the regular lesson plan. No offense to anybody who works on lesson plan, but it's those relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know before we get into the future, I did want to talk about two somewhat random things that went up, but I think that are positive things. So U.S. News and World Report came out with their rankings, and the Boston Business Journal came out with their rankings. So we'll start. I actually thought our rankings, A, we went up. B, we competed with all our neighboring towns. And and some of our neighboring towns actually went down. I mean, I was just saying, if you saw Saugus's numbers, you'd be terrified. I know you don't put a lot of stock in those rankings, so, but I got to imagine you'd be happy. And in the BBJ, we were the number 2 school system for value. I mean, in the entire state, Wakefield, Mass. was considered the second best place, value for your dollar for your education. So again, I know you're going to say they're all relative and every kid's different and unique.
So,
but when you kick butt, you got to take the lap.
Feels good.
I think so. The way things have gone in the last number of years, you turn on the news, you see, contract unsettled in this district, cutbacks in this district, strike in this
Melrose,
district.
look at Melrose, just the other day.
Districts people are struggling, right? And so, groups are struggling to kind of come together. I on this podcast, I said a couple of meetings ago, said I have to give credit where credit is due. The president of the WEA, Jess Cummings, has done a great job, right? Kind of leading her group. She settled the contract, right? As president, she was able to kind of guide the group and settle the contract and do it in a way that really created a better contract for teachers. And the best contract that we can create for teachers benefits all of us, right? And she was able to do that. And so, so we're all getting better. And I also think, and I want to give Jess credit as well, because I think she, like us, understand that unless we can come to a space and agree to disagree, right? And not always agree, but when we don't agree that we're going to disagree.
Speaking of me and Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Barris.
Perfect, right? Yeah. And so, but it's a way to move on, But our school system has improved every year for the last 9 years. It has improved every year for the last 9 years. And I say 9 years because I've only been here 9 years. I'm starting my 10th next year. And I also need to give credit for people that kind of really helped Wakefield make big jumps. Steve Reich, brought in kind of resources, settled kind of budgets that really helped us make bigger jumps, helped accelerate that. Kim Smith, I think, in her leadership, had a unique skill at bringing people together and to kind of move it forward. And I think we've taken what has started there and have continued to make it better. What we need to do is to continue to kind of be clear about what needs to improve, but what we're also good at. We started this meeting talking about, schools don't do public relations well. We don't, right? We just don't, right? We feel like it's our job. We're supposed to do well. We're supposed to, help students be, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 17, 18 years old. That's our job. It is our job. We're not public relations people. And it's given us a lot to think about because it's like if you don't define what you're doing well, it's like when you say take the lap. We do, but we do it in our own way, maybe silently. We got to do more talking about it. But in regard to your comment about U.S. News and World Report, we do think it's a relative reference, but do I look at it? Of course I do. Do I look at Boston Magazine? Of course I do. Do I look at, the Boston Business Journal and us being ranked, or Wakefield being ranked number two behind Newton for best value, and for the 3 metrics that are included, education being one of them? 100%. And am I proud of that? Yes. But it represents, like I said, a lot of hard work from a lot of really, really talented people. And so I'm grateful, but I expect, and I think we expect, I don't want to speak for Amy and Kara, but I think the mindset here is that we're supposed to get better every year, right? That's why we come to work every day. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but this is like a little bit of a trigger for me in regard to, yes, we're supposed to make it better. And I think that we are.
Well, and the metrics are showing that. I mean, whatever they use, at least they're using it. And it is something we should be proud of. Because like I said, on the flip side of that, if I saw the metrics in some of our neighboring communities had, I would be upset. And, to your point, Melrose just had an operational override devoted mostly to education, and it failed. It failed. And Melrose is a very, they have passed their share of overrides. But I think at a certain point, people, just said we just can't do it. So you're right. And it shows how important that fiscal management is. Now, with that said, what do we have to look forward to? All right, what's coming up that we should be excited about?
Yeah, there's a lot coming up. In the fall, we're going to be putting together a focus group with members of the community, members of our bargaining units, administration, and there'll likely be a school committee rep there to look at late start. And so we've been kind of, the community has been asking us, can we think about making this move? We were in negotiations last year, and that took really the majority of our time. And so we're going to be working very closely with this focus group to really look at the pros and cons and the how, right? How to start late. There's a lot of moving parts. A lot of the kids that did their civics projects would write us notes as leaders of the district saying, we really think it'd be a great idea to start late.
And this is for the high school or for everybody?
Middle school and high school. The kids did civics projects, and kids could pick up a topic that was important to them. So we probably got maybe a dozen or more, but we get them every year, right? And often they're with groups of kids, but the question is, can we please have a late start? And so or a later start at secondary, because research shows that if kids get more sleep, it helps them in regard to their productivity. And so, but with all that, what I think we're learning is that there are so many variables, transportation, right? And often when districts so we only have 9 buses for all of our schools because the buses drop off at all of our schools because the drop-offs and pickups are at staggered times.
Yep.
So if we continue to use those 9 buses, we're going to not only have to change the start time at the high school, we'll have to change the start times at elementary and middle, right? Now that affects families, but it also affects people that work here, right? So if you're a high school teacher and you've dropped off your own kids at school or at daycare, how many people that work here does that impact? How many buses does that impact? How do we pay for it? Like, what are the associated costs? When the kids are getting out later in the day, it also affects all of the rec sports schedules because kids are going to be on the playing fields later. Fine and performing arts, the band, theater, kids are going to be coming later. And so they're going to be getting home a little bit later. So we're just trying to balance all those things and just trying to reconcile it. But long story short, in regard to your question, what are we looking forward to in the fall? We're looking at doing a little bit of an analysis of late start to look at different scenarios and problem solve. We're also going to be looking at different data that's put out by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed around culture and climate, right? So every year, students participate in a survey when they take the MCAS. So that data is made public. We're going to be sharing that out because there's been a lot of talk about what is the climate of our schools? How do people feel about it, right? And one of the things that has been a little difficult is trying to come up with a common definition of, well, what is your definition of climate? What are the indicators of improvement? So we're going to be working on that and looking at some of the data that's already available. It's public. It comes from the Department of Ed. So we're going to be highlighting some of those things and talking about some of those things. So that's positive. Other things that we're going to be looking at is just kind of new goals, new school goals, and new district goals. We just in our last school committee meeting, principals came in and talked about their school improvement plans that include their school improvement goals. And I think it was a recorded meeting. I think the principals presented brilliantly. I think they presented really, really well. We're making really nice gains in a lot of areas. You'll see on the news a data point about difficulty districts are having about getting kids back into schools. Our attendance rates are up, and we're not kind of reacting to this. I think we've proactively been doing this since we came out of COVID, and I think the high school admin team, middle school admin team, and the elementary teams have been really effective at helping students get in. But we're going to be looking at those things in the fall. We're also going to be looking at expanding the Doyle, really kind of because we unfortunately had to turn away 60 students this year at the Doyle because we just don't have enough space. And at the end of the day, there are students, right? So they're coming to us no matter what. And if we can accommodate them and can have them in our preschool, that is our first choice 10 out of 10 times because kids get acclimated to our curriculum, our expectations, our school day. It's just a little bit different. So that's a long answer, Anthony. I'm sorry it's so long.
No, but it's good. I'll tell you on the late start, I think it's always been interesting to me that there's so many things we know about education. Like we know how things could work better that we simply don't do because it's too hard not because of the educational part, but because of all the associated parts.
Yeah.
And late start is one of them. So I'd love to see that happen. So with that said, that's it. As always, I do want to say thank you to WCAT and credit to Ian McDermott, who really does put this together. I mean, we're just sitting there and then he says, hey, when are you guys coming in to update the public?
Yeah.
So really, he's the PR guy. But thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. Please don't be a stranger.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.